My name's Gabby Hajduk. I am a junior at University of Illinois, and I study journalism with a focus in sports. And I started writing at my student newspaper when I was a freshman, the Daily Illini, and I just had such a fun experience. And I kind of kept going with it. And then I was the men's basketball beat writer last year. And Illinois was pretty good last year, so it was pretty exciting. And then in the spring, I actually transitioned to sports editor, which is my current position now. So I oversee everything in the sports section for our newspaper, which is stressful but super fun, especially in a year with a pandemic.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I literally assumed the position like the Friday that all the like Big Ten tournaments got canceled. So that was the start of my editor experience, which was interesting. But it's been good. I've had a really good time with it.
Now, one thing that people that haven't, I was at Ohio State and I was in that same area. I didn't get to be editor. I got to be peon, which was kind of cool. But one thing that people don't understand, I don't think, when you're looking at a Big Ten school and sports, they're thinking, oh, yeah, they've got football, they've got baseball, and they might have some soccer or some volleyball. How many sports do you cover?
We covered 21 sports.
21 sports, yeah.
21 sports total. Yeah, we pride ourselves in like covering literally every sport from, non-revenue all the way to revenue, which I think is super exciting because a lot of people don't understand what goes into like gymnastics or tennis or cross country. Like it's amazing what these other athletes do. So I think it is super cool that we get to cover literally everybody.
And the thing that people don't get is that how much time the non-revenue sports put in as opposed to the revenue sports, sometimes even more.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like I last year I did this story on a gymnast who scored a perfect 10. My favorite story ever because it's so hard to score perfect 10 and nobody knows that. And it's just the training that goes into this one like 60-second performance, like the moves that they have to tweak every day, like the turns and the twists and the everything, the jumps, like these athletes go through, like you said, as much or even more than, football, basketball, baseball, these sports that everybody knows and loves, and that's cool. But once you really get to start looking into what these other athletes are doing, it's so cool. And I think they deserve as much like attention and credit as the other sports, which is why I love my job, that I get to kind of like give them that attention. And it's weird, like they're some of the nicest, not weird, but like they're just some of the nicest people I've ever talked to because they don't get covered a lot. So like
Right.
talking to these athletes and coaches, like have some of the best conversations you'll ever have with them.
I had the good fortune to talk to one of the former synchronized swimmer at Ohio State. And, I said, well, it's easy to see when a football or basketball player walks into a classroom. You got a guy that's 6'9", or a football player at 6'3", 270. It's easy to see that that's a football player. So I asked her, I said, so do people recognize you as an athlete? She said, well, yeah. I said, well, how? You're 5'2". She said, my hair's always wet.
Yeah, that's funny.
I said,
It
okay,
makes
that
sense.
makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, she must have been in the pool before she got to class. So, okay. So
Exactly.
when the interaction, you mentioned the interaction with these student athletes, does it seem like, and I know you've been doing this for a while now, does it seem like we have athlete, student athlete, or just people on campus? How does it play out?
I think it's more just like people. Like as a college student, I'm talking to college students. So like a lot of these reporters are older and out of college, and they've been through this, and now this is their true profession. Where it's like I feel like me and my like other student journalists, like we're so blessed because like we get to be like in it, and we get to be in and around these people all the time. So it's like it can be intimidating. Like I remember when I first started, I was covering women's golf, and I was like, "Oh my god, this would be so scary. I've never like interviewed a college athlete before." And then you start talking to them, it's like, "Oh, they're literally just like me. They go to class, they go hang out with their friends, and they just have this extra thing that they do, which makes up a lot of their life." But it's kind of similar to what I do with journalism. Like it makes up a lot of my life, and covering them is my life, and what they do is their life. So I think once you kind of get going in this industry, like you realize they're literally just people just like you. Like for instance, like Io DeSuma, the biggest name on the Illinois campus right now. Like he is such a good interview, and I'm sure like everybody knows that. Like if you look at any of his interviews, he's the best. But
Mm-hmm.
when you talk to him, it feels like you're just talking to a normal person. Like, and I think that's what these athletes kind of want. Like, obviously, when you get to the pros and everything, they're these big bad, athletes, superstars. But some of these college athletes, I think, just want to be like treated like normal, and
Why they can, right?
they
Yeah.
don't necessarily always get that. So I think it is just looking at them as just normal people like me. They're literally my age. They do the same things as me. I see them walking to the same restaurants as me. Like, they live right by me. So I think it is obviously, like with football and basketball, it does feel a little more like, oh, they're like these student athletes, or they're these like big athletes, because you see them on TV everywhere. And but then you sit down and talk to them, it's like, oh, they're just like me.
Well, I have a quick little story. One of the this is I was in school, 5,000 years ago, but one of the big basketball players was, the featured guy on the game of the week, and they plastered his name all over the place. He had a great game, and I run into him the next day going to the laundromat.
Yeah.
It's like he's carrying his clothes in a basket, going to the laundromat. Like, oh, okay, yeah, all that stardom lasted for about 8 hours, and then back to being a normal person. Yeah, and I think
Exactly.
that and as our job, even as we grow older, and if we can keep that freshness, we have to realize that we're just talking about a passion that they have and a passion that we have, but adding into that, it's like we're just people, they're just people.
Exactly. I think that's the biggest thing, is like the reason why I love journalism so much, especially sports, is because like there's stories. Every person has a story. Every person has multiple stories that link to other stories. Like, and that's kind of our job, is to just tell those stories and make them these human people. Like, my favorite, probably one of my favorite stories I've ever read is, I think it was Mir and Fader who did it, or I could be wrong. She talked about like LaMelo Ball and just his journey through like Australia and everything, and it's like you just
Oh
humanize
yeah.
these people, and they have these stories, and people just see them on billboards and see them on TV, and like, oh my god, they're not like me. They are so different. It's like, A, they probably came from the same thing as you or something similar. B, they probably went through a lot of the same life experiences as you, and you just don't know that. So I think that's the cool part about journalism, especially sports journalism, is like getting to take these big superstars and these big names and just humanize them, because I think that's what they want. Obviously, I can't speak for them because I'm not
Right.
a student athlete, I'm not this big superstar, but I would think I would just want to be like humanized and seen as normal and not this like crazy person or whatever. So I think that is like the beauty of what we do. And I think you said it perfect. Like, you have to keep that mentality as you go on in this industry, because like obviously it's easy for me right now because I am a college student and I get to look at them the same. But once you grow up and get older, like if you can keep that mentality, I feel like that's when you get to tell the best stories.
Well, I think what I'm going to start doing is looking at it that way. And when I interview one of these people, I'm going to invite them to come to my yacht, and then I'll talk to them that way. So that'll make it easier that way.
I think so.
Now that sounds good, right? The elephant in the room is always, and it shouldn't be, and I don't know why it is, but it still is. You are, correct me if I'm wrong, female, correct?
Yes.
Right. So we have females, women in journalism, which doesn't seem to be, to me, an odd thing, but it's something that sometimes people look at women in sports as a little bit, I guess you're looked at as a minority, I guess is the best way of putting it. Is that something you even consider, or is it just I go out and do what I do and I'm accepted and it's not a big deal?
Yeah, I think it is definitely, I do consider myself a minority in this field, particularly like sports journalism. Obviously, like newsrooms across the nation aren't as diversified as well, but I think sports is one of those things where it's still so male dominated, whether it's just
Mm-hmm.
whether you're playing the sport, covering the sport, sports business, any of the fields within sport, it's so male dominated. And I think I used to think about it a lot, especially the first couple of years. And even with last year when I was covering basketball, I would walk into the press conference after games and there'd be like one or two women. And sometimes there would just be one, or it would just be me. And it was kind of intimidating because, I feel like to feel comfortable, you want to see people that look like you. And that goes for any sort of like minority group or anything. But it was intimidating at first. And I think it took me a while to get used to, but now I'm kind of in that mode where it's just like, you know what? if people look at me differently, that's on them. I do my work the same as anybody else does their
Right.
work. I try and do my own thing. I try and make a name for myself just as like Gabby and just as a journalist, not as like a, oh, like the one like woman journalist in the room.
Right.
Like, and I'm sure to some people I'm known as that. It's just like the one woman who covers basketball, but like that's my goal. I feel like is to like not be looked at as just like, oh, that's the woman that covers the team. It's like I just want to be another journalist. And I think that's kind of been my mentality, especially as sports editor, just because I think being in a leadership role as a woman, that's also not super common in the sports world. So just taking advantage of that and making it like normal for me and making it normal for other people and making it normal for all the other people on the beat. I try and be friends with everybody. I try and talk to everybody and kind of just let them know, I'm the same. Like I didn't play football, or I don't know every little thing about like every little football play, but I do know a lot, and I think the beauty of it is because I didn't play football, or I didn't compete in AAU tournaments like all these other guys did. It's like I get to look at stories from a different perspective, and I get to
Right.
see a little more of the human side versus like the basketball or the football side. And I think that's why I appreciate being in the spot I am. But yeah, it definitely is something you always think about, no matter how no matter how far I get in this industry. I think you'll always think about it. But the biggest thing is I've talked to so many women in sports journalism, like high up ABC 7, ESPN, and they're all just so willing to help each other. And I think that's the
Right.
beauty of
Right.
it is like women sports journalism or women sports journalists have this like little community. It's kind of like an unspoken rule. You just like help each other out and you talk to each other. It's
Right.
like I've met so many friends through Twitter, Instagram, like LinkedIn, whatever you want to like, whichever outlet you want to say. And it's really cool to have that constant support system because I've never come across a woman sports journalist that like didn't want to help me out or that didn't want to give me advice. So I think it is a cool group to be a part of.
Well, and not that this is a female, but I was speaking to Ted Robinson, who's done all kinds of stuff. Right now, he's the voice of tennis on the Tennis Channel, basically. Does Wimbledon, does all those events. And he said the key to being able to do this isn't that you played. The key to being able to do this isn't that you know everything. It's you know the mechanics of the game and you know the mechanics of what's going on. So he said, I have John McEnroe sitting next to me to tell me what's actually happening. I'm just making sure they get the score right and anything else that's happening journalistically. And it's kind of the same thing I see as doing what we're doing now. I don't have to know the difference between a see, I can't even say it, a two deep or a three deep. I have to know how that affects the people watching or reading. And I think we as journalists forget that our job isn't to describe what the people playing see. It's to describe for the people watching and observing see what they see. And we have to be able to communicate to a large variety of people. And I think it's really sad sometimes when we think, well, as a female, we're either going to talk down to the watcher or we're going to ask more for the writer or the journalist because we expect them to know more. Well, they shouldn't have to know more or less than anyone else does, but they have to be able to communicate that to other people. So I appreciate what you're talking about and the fact that you've been able to find those networking.
Yeah, no, it has been cool just to reach out to all these women. But yeah, I think I totally agree. Like, if you get so focused on the specific play or the specific route they're running or what defense they're playing, like, obviously you need to know that stuff and you need to like be able to convey that if it's important to your story. But most of the time, it's not important to your story. Your
Right.
story is about a person, or your story is about a group, or a specific action or something like that. It's like it's more important to be able to tell a story descriptively and in detail and with multiple sources and having this new perspective on it that nobody else has ever seen or heard or read. And that's more important to me than being able to tell you what route they're running or tell you how far down the field they got or anything like that. So I think it is important to remember that as any type of journalist, as any news, anything. It's just like really being able to hone in on those storytelling skills, I think is the most important thing.
Okay, now flip that around to being the editor.
Yes.
and having people bring you stuff. How difficult is that to do, or is it as opposed to writing yourself?
I think it's hard because when I write, I have my specific style and I know how I like things said, and I like how I or have my things structured, how I like my leads. And then you bring me all, like, I think we have like 20 or so writers. You bring me all
Right.
these different types of writing and all these, different styles. And it's like, at first it was hard. It's like, no, I don't like that. I want to make that my own sentence. But it's like, you can't change these people's writing.
Right.
Like, and it's all good writing. That's the thing. It's just different styles. So that was the biggest thing, is being able to like tell myself, you don't have to change anything to what you like. Like, it doesn't have to be what you like. It's about, do they tell the story well? Is the grammar right? Are they hitting all the points? Do they have quotes? Are they talking to multiple people? It's about those things. And then obviously you have to change some style things around. But that was the biggest thing. It wasn't, handling the section or, making the newspaper. It was getting out of my own head to be like,
Right.
don't change all these other people's writing. And I think it's been cool because I've learned things from these writers. Obviously, like, I'm the same age as a lot of these people. So it is that little weird, like, oh, I'm your boss, but like, we're also friends type of thing.
Right.
But I've learned a lot from everybody else's writing. It's like, oh, I like how he wrote that. Like, our men's basketball writer right now, Brandon, he's just amazing. I love his writing. So it's like, the way he writes recaps and previews, I kind of pick up on that. And it's like, I like how you did that lead, or like, I like how you didn't just say the score. You kind of gave me something else that someone didn't already know, that you can't get from an ESPN box score or something like that. So that's probably been my favorite part of being editor, is just kind of getting to pick everybody else's styles and putting it into mine. It's like,
That's
oh,
what I
I
was going to
like
say.
how you
Right.
do that. So I'm going to take that for myself. But it is also just rewarding, like, seeing my writers grow. Like, some of my writers, the way they started and how they're writing now is just so cool. Because, like, obviously it's not all me. Like, they put in so much work, but it's like, oh yeah, I've had a part in that. Like, that's cool.
Right.
That helped you grow. And it's kind of given me a new perspective on like a different sector of journalism with editing and copy editing and all that. Cause I've never thought about that, but now it's something I'm interested in. It's like getting to help other people. It's like, I had editors helping me my freshman and sophomore year. And, I like to think I'm a pretty decent writer now. So they did something right. So
Right.
it's cool to just be a part of that on the other side.
When you look at what you do now and how you write things, do you find that you've kind of cherry picked a little bit here, a little bit there because you see more things coming in? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it's cool because it's like, I think that's just the beauty of reading and like looking at other journalism. Because I tell all my writers, like, make sure you're reading other people. Like, you should be reading
Right.
an article a day at least. Like, because you have to learn from other people. Like, you don't just pick up a pen and paper one day and start to write. Like, you learned from reading. And you can do the same with journalism. And I think no matter if I'm an editor or just a writer, just like reading other people's work and seeing how they do things, you can always add that to your own writing and just change up your own style all the time.
Well, I found that when I started reading and editing other people's stuff, that I look back at my stuff and went, do I do that every time?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I almost always had well, comma, something.
Yeah.
I even do it when I speak. So I thought I was just writing like I spoke. I realized you don't do that. And there's always a so, comma, something, and a just, comma, something. But that's not necessary. But you
Mm-hmm.
don't realize it when you're just doing it yourself because it sounds right. Until you
Exactly.
start looking at other people's work, you go, oh, wait a second. That was stupid. Why did I do that?
Yeah.
So I'm glad you picked that up because it is very important to read other people's stuff. And it's very hard to self-critique yourself
Yes.
when you're going from nothing. But now when you have other things to compare to, like, wow, I suck.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's like, oh, they're making that mistake. Wait, let me look at my own story. Oh,
Yeah,
I made that mistake too, but you don't realize it because when you're reading your own writing, you're reading it in your little head,
right.
and that voice is what you use to talk. And it's like, well, that's how I say it, and that's how I talk, so it should be fine. And then when
It's
you're
just great.
yeah, and then you're editing it, like, wait, that's completely wrong. That needs to be taken out. So it is cool. It really is.
And it was the same thing doing it this one. I know you did some radio as well.
Yeah.
There are certain things that we say and certain ways we say things that you don't catch until you hear somebody say them. Now, I'm one of those fortunate people that I've been blessed with this, whatever it is. You know, my brother's is even better than this voice. My brother's is better than mine. Cousins are better than mine, but it's a hereditary thing. So I
Mhm.
don't have to really work on that part, but the
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm trying to make a point that I'm really thinking about something. I'll kind of go just that little stammer on purpose, but I don't know it's on purpose. And
Mhm.
then you hear it, or when you hear somebody else do it, you go,
Yeah, you're like, oh, that doesn't sound too good. Maybe
yeah,
I should.
I didn't know that I did that because
Yeah.
it's hard to edit yourself until you hear somebody else. Okay, now how do people accept, because now that you're being nice and kind and playful and all that and telling them, you know, you might want to do this, you might want to think about that. How do you get people to accept those critiques and that criticism?
I think everybody takes it pretty well. I think when I started editor, I had a couple meetings obviously with everybody to start, and my biggest thing was that I'm I'm just like you guys. Like, I'm your age. I am a year or two maybe older than you in school. Like, I am more, obviously you have to like distinguish that line between like friend and boss, but like I'm also your guys' like colleague and peer and like sometimes friend. Like, I can be your friend outside of work, and like I want to be able to communicate with you guys like I'm your friend, and not like I'm this scary person or someone you don't want to talk to outside of like our edits or outside of our meetings.
Right.
Like, and that was the biggest thing, is just like connecting with everybody on like a very basic friendship level, to where they know I'm just helping them out. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not trying to tell you your writing sucks. And it's like, I think the biggest thing is just establishing that strong relationship to start, to be like, I'm doing this to help you. I'm doing this to help our section as a whole. When your writing gets better, everybody's writing gets better. When your story gets better, our whole paper gets better. And that's what everybody should want. I mean, obviously you're doing this to help yourself, and you're doing this to, craft your own writing or whatever, but you're also doing this as part of a big group to help us put out a really good paper every couple days, or to help us put out really good online content. So having that sense of like community and like unity, I think was the biggest thing that I wanted to establish from the beginning. And then just when you are giving them these criticisms, also tell them what they're doing right. I think that's what we often
Right.
forget as like editors is, oh, you did this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, change this. Why don't you tell them what they're doing right so they know what they can keep doing? It's like,
Right.
you tell them all the things they should stop doing, tell them what they should keep doing. And that's for every like criticism. Whenever I do like edits, like one-on-one, or just when I'm talking to them as a group, it's like, okay, sure, you did this wrong, or you need to improve on this, but you're really good at this, and I want to show everybody that you did this well. And I think just having that really good balance of, right and wrong helps build their confidence while also make them a better writer. And I think that's, obviously, I'm not the end all be all of like leadership
Sure.
style or whatever, but it's worked for me and my group, and I think everybody's improved in their writing since I've been there, which is great. And that could not be a product of me, I don't know, but I do like to think that is a good style of just, you need that constructive criticism, and you need to tell people when they are doing things wrong. You can't try and be nice and be like, oh, this is perfect, when it wasn't.
Really wasn't
And
right.
that's okay. No story is perfect. I mean, the best writers still need editors and still need to have constructive criticism, but it's also letting them know, oh, you did this right, or you do this really well. Like, I really like how you do that.
So you hit on something that's very important. This actually goes into coaching. So the next time you're at a game and you actually get into a game and watch a coach, see if they do this. When someone comes out of the game, even if it's the assistant coach, it especially works for or for basketball. I'm sorry, I was a former basketball coach.
Okay.
When you take somebody out of the game, first of all, they don't go just sit down. They stop and talk to you on the sideline.
Mm-hmm.
And in a brief moment, you have to say, here's what you did well. Here's what you didn't do well. Here's what you're going to do when you go back in. Not if
Mm-hmm.
you go back in, when you
When.
go back in. So they get that the bad part in the middle surrounded by good stuff.
Yep.
And the bad part usually isn't that bad. It's just something, a mental mistake or whatever. But you also say, I didn't take you out because of that, but because of, it's time for Johnny to play, or there's a different matchup, or we're trying to another play or something where it works. But it's never like they throw the ball in the stands and yank them out of the game right away,
Mm-hmm.
because you've lost somebody for days, maybe weeks at that point. And as you're talking about, if I have to write an article every day or every other day. And every time I turn it in, it's like, well, that wasn't very good. Do better next time. Well, what's on in my head the next time I'm doing an article? The same thing.
Exactly.
So that you touched on something very good. Now, I have a question for you that's going to really show my age. Now, when I was in journalism school, we used stone tablets and hammer and chisel and no, but the concept of you just said, we print the paper maybe once a week, but we're online every day.
Hmm.
The concept of journalism now is different than the concept of journalism 20 years ago. Can you see the point where, or the part of, well, maybe the print's going to go away, or that's kind of like a bonus? We do this all the time, and our deadlines are different than we've got to put the paper to bed because it gets printed at Thursday at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, I think so. My paper personally, we print twice a week. And it's been an adjustment the last couple years because we've been slowly like shifting to focusing online, which everybody else is doing. And we're a little behind. I think like student newspapers in college are probably some of the last groups to get going on this like focusing on online stuff. But it's hard. And I was talking about this with another student journalism. I love putting together the paper. I love design, like seeing the page when it's all
Right.
done after I've edited everything and after design has put all their work into it. I love seeing the paper. Not everybody does. And as a journalist, sure you love it, but what does your audience love? And I think
Right.
that's been the biggest turning point. It's like just because you like putting it together and you like how it feels at the end when it looks all pretty or whatever, doesn't mean that everybody else cares about that. Nobody else thinks about all the time going into the newspaper. They're just
Right.
reading it. And I think we are at the point where I think like actual print newspapers are becoming just this like supplement or this little extra thing on the side because I think online content is just so accessible and anybody can do it. And I think that's the beauty of it is you don't need this like crazy journalism degree or journalism school experience to really be a journalist. And that's hard because I am in journalism school, I'm not paying so much money to like be in college, but it is cool because anybody can get into this field and anybody can really, excel in this field because online is so important right now. And you get content from millions of different places. And sure, some is better than others, and you can tell the amateurs from the pros, and that's okay. But I think as a journalist, you really have to, it's time to focus on what does my audience want? Not what I want and not what I like, but what does my audience want? And that's online content. And we put out at least a story a day. Obviously, with a bunch of sports starting now, like our content has increased, but it is interesting going from what we do in the newspaper and online is completely different. You have to look at it completely different. Obviously, you want to include like tweets or hyperlinks or links to other stories, that can take readers to other information. Whereas like, and that's so cool because when you pick up a newspaper, you read it, that's all you can read. You can't go to other places, you can't look at other stories. Where, okay, if I have a basketball story on my website, I can link one of our other stories that refers to a person we're talking about, and they can
Right.
go read that, and then they can go read something else. And it kind of just builds up your readership, and it builds up this audience that is connected in different parts of your website. It's really cool. I think it is upsetting that print edition is kind of like phasing out. I don't think it'll ever completely go away, at least not like in the near future, because I think there are people who do still like it. There are readers that do still like it, but definitely is kind of becoming that like supplement or that little like extra type of thing.
I remember my freshman year going into the union, opening up the paper, having my cup of tea or cup of coffee or whatever with the donut and going, I'm a college student.
Yep.
That was just cool. And you'd sit there and go, I'm not, I don't have to go do anything for my mom and dad, and I'm reading the paper. That doesn't exist the same way anymore. So I get that. Now, because of that, do you find that you edit and write a little bit differently than you would if it was just print as opposed to online? Seeing as how it's more of a tweet kind of concept of doing a story and then giving it a little blurb and then having it go someplace else?
Yeah, I think it is a lot different because when you have this online focus, you can post breaking news right away. You could get that story out right away as opposed to waiting for your next print edition to come out. So you get your readers engaged right away, because all these other like online only websites are going to beat you to that if you're just focusing on your print edition, where in the world we live in, especially with sports journalism, everyone wants to know everything right now. It's like,
Right now, right.
if you're 2 hours behind, don't care, not rating your
Yeah.
thing. Like, you need to be on it. So that's the beauty of online. It's like, okay, like when Lovie Smith got fired and Brett Bielema got hired at Illinois, we got that story out right away and we were with everybody else. And then when our print edition came out, we did a different story. So it's just like,
Okay.
online especially is those like breaking news or like the schedule changes or things like that. And then when your print edition comes, you have time to write a bigger story on it, or go into a little more in depth on a topic that you just spent like 200 words on only to put online, where it's like your print edition, you put a little more time into some of those extra stories. But online, like, we still do put a lot of like features and long stories online. But it is cool because obviously you have deadlines and everything for online still, but you're not, like, you don't have to get a story in print, where it's like
Right.
a writer, if he or she needs more time on a story that's going online, okay, I can give you that time if you need it. Or, oh, you want to add something else, I can edit it into the online and just put a little editor's note where it's like, when it's in the paper, it's gone forever, like, can't change it. So it is cool to just have that ability to adapt and ability to change things on the fly, or just throw a 100-word story out just so people know the news. I think that's really the coolest part about online content.
Do you structure your newsroom differently because you say, okay, you're going to work on more features, more long-term, long things, as opposed to this person's going to do breaking news, and it might be the same story, but you pass it from one to the other? Or is it pretty much you started it, you run with it?
It's kind of, you start with it, you run with it type of thing. Me and I have two assistant
Okay.
editors. We kind of handle all the breaking news stuff. So like when really short things come out, like, we'll write that story real quick because we can just do it quicker, and we have access to all the online stuff. So we typically do that, and then, so I guess then our beat writers, so say like our basketball writer, if something happened with Io or something, we put it out right away, and then he'll do a longer story on it for whether it's online or the paper. So me and my assistants handle most of the breaking news stuff. So yeah, I guess it is like we start and then we pass it on to like the beat writers.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you the question that cannot be answered because it doesn't seem to have an answer. But now that you are into this and you seem to be very passionate, what does the future hold? Or what would
Oh,
you like the future to hold? I guess is a better way of putting it.
um, I would like the future to hold a job in a year and a half when I get out of college,
That would
but
be nice, right?
that would be nice, right? But I think I just love telling stories and I love writing. I do radio and podcasts and broadcasting, and I love that as well. But my biggest passion is writing, and I just love being able to tell these, stories that people don't get to see on the TV, or don't get to see when, you're watching a kid run down the floor for 20 minutes at a time. Like, and so I think end goal is, like long form feature sports writing, kind of like what Miran Fader does. She's like my favorite writer ever. And I love what she does, just diving into these people's lives that, you know, bringing out things people will never know, just watching a game, or, watching a little ESPN highlight. So that's my dream, is to just be able to write these longer stories about these athletes, these coaches, these teams, that just humanize them and just show that they're just like us. They're people. Yeah, they're in a different, they might be in a different salary level than us. They might have their own private yacht, but like, they have come from very similar things to us, and they deal with very similar things that we do, and that we need to treat them like people. And some people, especially on Twitter, get really angry. Like, I think the biggest thing recently was with like Kyrie Irving. He had to take time away, and who knows what really happened. But like, you have to think of these people like
Right.
humans, and who knows what he was going through. You don't know. So it's like, being able to kind of tell those
Right.
stories, I think, is my end goal.
Well, and that's what we try and do here. At least that's what I try and do here. Is that you're going to find, and that's why when we started, I said I have about 4 or 5 questions in mind that I never ask because it always goes somewhere else, almost always goes somewhere else, which makes it more fun. I'll give
Yeah.
you a quick example. I just did an interview with Carl Lee, who was a cornerback with the Vikings a few years back, but he now lives literally blocks away from where he grew up in Charleston, West Virginia.
Dang.
And he actually serves at the community center, the youth center that he went to as a kid. But
Oh.
here's a guy who's a Pro Bowl cornerback in the NFL, and he's gone full circle back to that. And there are plenty of those stories out there. Unfortunately, we focus on the ones of the guy that made $17 million and is now bankrupt, or did this, is in jail, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things, like you say, a long story that is worth promoting because it just shows that people are people.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you being here. I know that on a day off from college, it's a day off. So stop talking to me and go have some fun.
No, thank you so much. I had so much fun doing
Uh,
this.
you're
I
welcome.
appreciate it.
Okay, now where can people find you? We always have to tag that at the end.
Of course. So my Twitter is at Gabby _H11, GABBY _H11. And then if you want to read any of my stuff, you can go to dailyillini.com. That's where all my writing is. And that's where all our sports stuff is. So if you're interested in anything Illinois, again, we cover all 21 sports. So no matter if you're into gymnastics, basketball, tennis, swim, dive, we got it all for you. I think we do a lot of really cool stuff. So also go Illini against Iowa this weekend. I will be at the game, so I'm excited. I think that'll be a really big game. I know you said you went to Ohio State, so I am a little salty that you guys beat us, but it was a good game. It was a good game. I was at the game, so it was fun to watch.
Okay, now I'll ask you this one: Kofi or Luka?
Luka, I'll admit Luka is better. I'll admit Luka is better just because he has the perimeter range and Kofi has trouble guarding that. But I think Kofi's ready for Luka. I think he's had time to study. I think he knows what's coming. He's not going to be surprised by his 3-point shot, his ability to, run around the perimeter. I think Kofi's going to be ready for Luka. I think people are going to be surprised.
I think having had to guard EJ Liddell last week will prepare him better for having to go out on the perimeter. And there's no way, I mean, Luka's fantastic, but he's not as athletic. So I think that's a key.
Yeah, I think having EJ Liddell before Luka was big because EJ Liddell kind of just torched us, which is upsetting because he could have gone to Illinois, but whatever. We'll let it go.
That's another story entirely.
That's we can talk about that at every time. But yeah, I'm excited for the Luka Kofi matchup. I think it'll be a really good game.
Cool. Well, thank you once again. Like I said, we'll get this posted. We'll let you know what's going on and enjoy your day. And this has been great. We'll have to revisit this and bring some of your other people on and give them some exposure as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Was so fun.